Welcome back for another episode of Sunday SoulDay, fueling your mind, body, and soul with soulful conversations and life changing insights. Today's episode is sponsored by Leadership Garden, a coaching ecosystem created to provide women and men with the safe, supportive space to rewire leadership identities, prune limiting patterns, and grow into purpose aligned roles. The platform cultivates holistic growth backed by neuroscience for leaders, working parents, founders, and teams seeking to lead with authenticity, alignment, and wholeness. Today, we are joined by Lynn Grigas, a licensed mental health counselor, educator, and author, and we delve into how unresolved trauma lives in the body, the subconscious, and the soul, and how true transformation begins when we go beyond words. With over 30 years of clinical experience, Lynn shares stories, research, and practices that bridge psychology, spirituality, and science. Let's welcome her to the show. Welcome to Sunday SoulDay, Gay.
Thank you so much, Tamisha. What a pleasure to be here with you.
I could not agree more. Thank you so much to just agreeing to be on the podcast and also just sharing your light with us. I can't wait for the audience to get to know you a little bit and also
Yes.
just all the important work you're doing.
Thank you. And the important work that you're doing
Oh,
because you're touching millions of people's lives and sharing your light in the world definitely helps to uplift the whole world and add to that healing that spirit wants us all to have a taste of. And you're giving everybody this opportunity to be immersed in that, Tamisha. So thank you so much.
thank you. Oh my, thank you for saying that. I receive all of that. So thank you so much. And it is, as we talked about earlier, it's truly a gift. And I'm just so grateful to be used in this way. So I wanted to ask you first, how did you get started into this work? Like, tell us a little bit, like, give the audience a little color because your background is
Yes.
incredible.
Yes. Well, I was very fortunate in that I was immersed in the world of spirit and understanding how significant the spiritual life is since I was a child. And it came in two tracks, which was kind of interesting. On my mother's side, they were American Baptist. And so it was, we were in church all the time. We were in church at least 3 days a
3 days a
week.
week. Yeah.
At least, I mean, it was
Oh
like,
my
well,
God.
this is what we do. This is life. Yeah. And I love the community. I love the connection. I love the music. I love the ritual and ceremony that went along with it. And so I had, and all of my cousins, aunts, uncles, grandparents went to the same church. And so that was really significant and almost like a day gone by in some way that doesn't exist as much anymore. But for me, in my upbringing, that existed. And at the very same time, which is an interesting parallel, my father also had an interest because his father had given him these very interesting books, and they were called The Secret of the Ages. It was by Robert Collier. And The Secret of the Ages was about understanding a little bit more on the metaphysical side of things, where you're understanding the spiritual path, but how does that spiritual path inform and enlighten us, and how that connection to universal mind, to the divine mind, is very real, and we can tap into that. So I'm going to church and enjoying that experience, with my mom and dad. And my dad gives me these books when I'm 13 years old. And
Dang.
so at
Wow.
13 years old, I begin to understand a little bit more about the metaphysical world. And basically, it's just meta is what is beneath this world, what informs and enlivens this world, and it's spirit. And so the more we understand that spirit is, in and through and as us, we begin to have a richer experience in our life. And so that was my beginning at a very young age.
What a gift that your dad gave you,
What a
because I
gift.
bet that just opened you up. in so many ways. Like as children, naturally we have so many questions about the world and we're trying to figure things out as we go, but just allowing you to have that experience through your own learning and understanding, like what a gift.
It was such a gift, and I still have the books, and I still have, and they're 100 years old now because
Mhm.
his father gave it to him, and then my father gave them to me, and and they're very tattered now after almost 100 years, and in it is my 13-year-old writing of how I was taking notes from the book and understanding my connection to the divine.
Oh my gosh. I love that. I love it. Oh my gosh. Like I have not read these books, so I need to get my hands on them. So
Yes,
like,
and Collier's books are still available. He was a
are they?
clergyman and he was also a businessman. So he kind of came at this from both aspects of, spirituality as well as a kind of a business mind as well. And he was a writer. And so there's a compilation book, Secrets of the Ages, that's still available to this day, and still published to this day.
Well, you've been doing clinical work for 30 years now, maybe over 30 years. Like, what patterns have you seen in just how unhealed wounds show up in people's daily lives?
That's an excellent question, and I think it really speaks to the bigger question too of why our spiritual life is so important for us, and the reason for that is that people are struggling to a certain degree with meaning and purpose. They've lost their internal compass. They no longer know themselves, know their connection to something greater than themselves. And remember, I've worked for decades in drug and alcohol rehab as well. So, and innate within the 12 steps is this relationship with a power greater than yourself, and it's the higher power, it's God. And so we have to be able to connect with that. And with the biggest pain in being disconnected is losing your sense of self and losing your sense of meaning and purpose in life. And then every addiction in the world will come to fill in, that place of emptiness. I mean, in my definition of addiction is spiritual bankruptcy in a very clear, concise way. It's this spiritual emptiness that nothing else can fill. And yet it doesn't matter how much alcohol, drugs, sex, shopping, gaming, whatever you try to pour into it, it doesn't fill from the outside in. The spiritual bankruptcy has to be healed from the inside out.
Spiritual bankruptcy. I'm so using that. That is
Mhm.
so beautifully articulated. Oh, it's like it gave me chills when you said it because that's exactly what addiction is. Like it's this spiritual bankruptcy, this non-connection to yourself. You're connecting to everything else to fill a void within yourself when really you can only do that with, something bigger than yourself, whatever you call that, whether it's universe, God, for me, I call, my mind God. And so
Hmm.
like whatever that is for you, like I could not agree more. And you mentioned the 12 steps. And I have a course that I'm getting ready to launch out into the world. I kind of soft launched it just to get some feedback. But that's exactly, I have 12 steps in the process to wholeness.
Hmm.
And the wholeness is just reconnecting back to yourself and who our creator intended you to be, you know.
Exactly.
And that's so I love that you touched on that.
In fact, one of the books that I wrote a number of years ago was called 12 Powers in You. And so when we connect, and you could use that as a resource with your course
I
too, that might
will.
be interesting. And the current book that is really touching people's lives in a very dynamic way, Psychedelics, Dreams, and Rituals. And this is, another way of touching into those non-ordinary states of consciousness. Now, when we are connected with spirit, when we're connected in a community of worship, when we're connected with someone praying with us, when we're connected with that power that is greater than ourselves, we are aligned with our innate power and it heals us from the inside out because there is in many people a hole in the soul, and that hole is, no matter how much they pour in from the outside, how many relationships they have, how much money they have, it doesn't fill up. It just drains right out because they have this hole inside. And just like you said, when we connect with ourselves, we connect with our wholeness and our holiness, and it begins to heal the hole that is inside of the soul, so that then when spirit's poured into us, it allows us to heal. And then when love and connection and a sense of belonging and a sense of purpose comes, we're connected to it and it fills us from the inside.
So beautifully said. Oh my gosh, like I'm going to quote you because and I'm going
Yes,
to put
please
it in my
do.
course because that is so beautiful. That gaping hole is what so much of us feel, when we're not connected or when we've allowed all of these outside things, experiences, chasing dopamine, chasing addiction, like all of these things to really lead us,
Hmm.
and I think that gaping hole is gets bigger and bigger when we're not taking care of ourselves and not feeling ourselves. So like the tagline for the show is weekly fuel for your mind, your body, and your soul.
Hmm.
Because I'm like, when the three work together, that's when you're in full alignment. And I think so much of the world is really misaligned. They're out of alignment. Whether it's out of alignment in their jobs, out of alignment in their homes, and you're just existing.
That's it. And that's the emptiness that many people feel. And so because they don't want to feel, and trust me, I've been a therapist for over 30 years. Nobody comes into my office because they're just, they're doing fine. They just want a little tune
Just
up,
want to talk a little pep
No, they
talk.
just want to talk. No, they're coming into my office because they are in pain, you
Pain.
know, and pain isn't something that we should resist, or the ache is there for a purpose. Even our aches have, our heart aches, our soul aches for something more, and it's leading us and it's guiding us in a particular direction. And the avoidance of the pain is what really creates the suffering, because I don't want to deal with this pain, so I have a drink. I don't want to deal with this pain, so I smoke some cannabis. I don't want to deal with this pain, so I just get into another relationship or buy something online. And they're avoiding the pain, and they think that will satisfy them. And it may for a very brief time, but then the ache is always there beneath the surface. The pain is there. And then finally they're sick and tired of being sick and tired, and they have they don't want this pain. They want to find a way out of it. And they think it's something external to themselves oftentimes. But the real pain, and this is a key, and we really have to remember this, is that in some ways we have put ourselves in our own self-made prisons. And yes, it's a prison of the mind. It's
Is
a prison
prison of the
of
body, of the
a prison.
soul, all of
That's
it.
right. And
Yeah.
it manifests then in all these different anxiety, depression, PTSD, unresolved trauma. All of these things begin to surface and or happen. And it's another way that people avoid this is just thinking they're the victim, right? And they get into victim mentality. And that's not good either, because it's just giving your power away and not understanding the power that you need is already inside of you. It's God given, it's always been there, it will always be there. And we have the ability to heal ourselves from the inside and release ourselves from those self imposed prisons that we've created.
Yes, I love that you mentioned power. I was just about to say that. I think we give our power away in so many instances. Like
That's it.
we're living, our lives for others rather than for ourselves and for our creator. And a large part of that is just they're constantly giving their power away all throughout their life, and staying in that victim mindset. I'm like, there's a difference between being victimized and being a victim.
Yes.
And, one quote, I hear a lot of people saying is like things were done for you. But I'm like,
Mm.
I think there's a miss. And, something I had added to that is like things are done to you for you.
Hmm.
And I think that's an important key because it is important to acknowledge that things are done to you so you can
Hmm.
acknowledge the pain, right? And or
Yes.
acknowledge things that occur in your life, but for your higher, better self. And I think you can't take the jewels without the thorns.
Hmm.
And
That's
so
very true.
all of it goes together.
All
So
of it goes together. And there is this part of us that has the pain, that holds that pain. But the pain can be that place where we crack open. And once we crack open, then the light begins to emerge from within us. And then we understand that this pain, and Demisha, I cannot tell you how many times, is not just their pain, they've been carrying it generationally. And so many people, when I'm working with them and we start looking at how this pain showed up for their mother or father, or their grandmother or their grandfather, or their great grandmother or their great grandfather, and it's been in the family for 75 to 100 years. And now they're finally the one who says, no more. We're not carrying this generational pain and trauma one more generation, one more day, one more year. It's got to stop, and it's going to stop with me. And that takes a lot of courage and a lot of stepping up to the plate to acknowledge that and work through that. But we can do it. And I
absolutely.
see you raising your
I
hand like,
know because
yes,
I'm like, yes, that's exactly how I feel. And I'm think that unhealed trauma, it just keeps passing down generation after generation until you get a generational trauma curse breaker, that,
yes,
like you says it's enough. So then they can not only heal it for themselves, which is very important to call out, but also everyone that comes after, so you can have a new set of skills for the next generation that they're now or even I would say blueprint for the next generation, because the blueprint has been trauma. The blueprint has been
yes.
unhealed and unresolved things that have just carried for so many generations. And even if you think about what you feel in the womb, like a lot
Oh,
of
yeah.
that comes from like your mother maybe who didn't heal hers. Now you're carrying that too, and that weight is so heavy. And I think when you get to a point where you're like, I can't do this anymore. I mean,
Yeah.
that was me. I'm like, I can't. I need to rewrite my story. And I think
Hmm.
that's where people take their power back. I need to
Hmm.
rewrite everything, not
Hmm.
just for me but for my children and then everyone after. So I love
Hmm.
that you mentioned that. You also
Yes.
mentioned like traditional talk therapy, which often I would say falls short in some cases when it comes to trauma. Like why do you think that is? Like and what do people need beyond words to truly begin their healing? Like if they wanted to start today.
Well, one of the things that they could do to start today, and they have to be able to do two things,
Okay.
and that is they have to be willing to read or at least listen to a book, and they have to be willing to write. And it's so simple and so basic. So the reading has to be immersion into inspirational material that lifts them up. And if I might add, my book, Psychedelics, Dreams, and Rituals, in the very beginning of the book, there's 50 pages, and the whole thing is a guidebook. It's a guidebook to help them on their inner healing process. So it starts right from the very beginning, like, who am I? You know, looking at the existential question, who I was, who I am, and who I want to be. Just like you're saying. And I have to write about that and understand a little bit more about myself and not be so outwardly focused in everybody else's life and everybody else's world, and not in my own life and not in my own world. So this brings us back to the inner journey. And once having these questions, and the first 50 pages are writing prompts, and they're super easy to do. Anybody can do this. This is no cost. This isn't even going to see a therapist. This is, although I think that's very valuable, obviously, because you can bring this into somebody that you're working with, and you've got your foundation. It's like working a garden, and I use this analogy a lot. So, part of what we have to do is prepare the garden of our mind to receive the new seeds that want to be planted from spirit, planted from love, planted from, healing. And so we got to take out the roots and the rocks and the stumps of the old trees and everything out of that garden first. And that's the heavy lifting. And this is the part that some people just, honestly, they just get lazy. And I just am saying it like it is because they want somebody else to come in and clean their inner world.
What if they want that quick fix? It's like a diet pill. And I'm like, it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't
Like,
work
it
that
doesn't
way.
work that way.
And you have to be willing to clean up your own backyard
Yes.
and clean out your own garden. And
Yeah.
then once having done that, then the mind, then the body, then the soul and the spirit is ready for new seeds to be planted. And look, Jesus talked about this all the way through the scriptures. He used metaphors in teaching us. There are seeds that we're planting, but all the seeds are not going to take root because some of the seeds fall on the rocks and some of the seeds, don't go into the soil of the soul where they need to be. But we can enhance that and make that much more a place of growth by doing our inner work, cleaning up our own garden, cleaning up our own backyards. Nobody can do it for us. We have to do it for ourselves, but we don't have to do it alone. And
Yeah.
I use that phrase a lot. I alone must do it, but I never do it alone. And spirit is doing it with us. Our higher power is doing it with us. God is doing it with us. We can join in communities that are doing it, and we're all doing it together. But I have to do my own work.
Yes. I love that you called that out. And I think that's so important too. It's like, I think we live in this or world. And I talk about this often on the show. And it's so important to live in the and world, where there's less
Correct.
tension. And you can do this, gathering her book, willing to read, willing to write, and get a therapist,
Yes.
and just even having that sounding board as you're going through and learning new things, and uncovering, because I think a large part of, and I love that you use the garden analogy. My whole coaching business is centered around that.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
yeah, and
That's
it's called
beautiful.
yeah, it's called leadershipgarden.ai, and I have like all my courses and everything, that falls under that. But I do believe everything that we do is very similar to how we garden. We're the gardeners.
Hmm.
So we get to choose which seeds we want to take root, and how we want it to take root, but we got to do the work first. And I think that's the part that people don't want to put on the gardening hat, and do that work. That work is hard. If you think about gardening, it's not easy work. And
It
and
isn't.
it takes patience, and it takes,
Yes.
like seeing what works, because the seeds that you might be trying to plant might not be the ones that you need. So they're not going to take root in the soil. So
Yes.
many analogies, but I love that you mentioned that. And something else that is so important is we don't have to do it alone. Whether we're in a community, whether we're, in fellowship just like this, but finding someone who is maybe further along than you, if you can't maybe afford therapy or a coach, that you can bounce those new discoveries off of is so key, because you do need support during this work, or otherwise you'll feel very alone. And it's
Hmm.
hard. It's
It
not
is.
easy work. That's why a lot of people stop, and they're
Yes.
also afraid of change and what's on the other side of that, because there isn't a roadmap of, okay, after you do this, this is going to happen. Then after you do that,
Hmm.
that's going to happen. It's not. So it's all this new discoveries that you discover along the way.
Yes. And I like what you said about sometimes we carry this in the womb. And it's really very interesting to me because, as you know, I use psychedelic assisted therapy only with what's legal. I'm only above ground. I only do what's legal. And I use ketamine assisted psychotherapy. And so, in the ketamine assisted psychotherapy, sometimes they go back into the womb and they begin to understand how and what happened even pre-birth. And pre-birth, for many, it's
Unbelievable.
where they first come in, their first experience in this lifetime. It's not when they come out of the womb, it's when they're in the womb and all the other influences around them that have impacted them. If their mother was depressed, if there was, stress, anxiety. I had one client whose mother went to the doctors for her regular checkup, And this woman had suffered with anorexia and bulimia. And usually that's not something I work with, but I have worked with anorexia and bulimia. But you know how spirit is. Spirit brought me this woman. It was like, you're supposed to work with her. And I was like, okay. I'm willing, I'm here to serve. And when we started talking about her birth and what was significant, did she know any stories about it? She in the womb was starving because her mother's womb was dying when she was in the womb. So she's starving, and intermittently there would be nutrients available, so she would gobble it down. Well, her pattern of anorexia and bulimia was formulated in the womb, and she was born early because her mother was had to immediately go to the hospital. She had an emergency C-section, and then this little tiny baby was put into an incubator. And it's really fascinating, though, even from that point, she didn't get a lot of touch, she didn't get a lot of holding, because when you're in the incubator, you have some of that, but it's not like, you know, that skin to skin connection. And so even that was kind of patterned in to a certain degree. But the people who did take care of her moment by moment were nurses, right? The nurses were there. The nurses tended to her. Now, consciously or unconsciously, guess what this woman became? A nurse.
No. Oh, come on.
Yes.
Shout out to nurses.
Shout out to
Great.
nurses.
Amazing.
Exactly. So her
Wow.
first bond was with
Oh,
nurses. And so when you said we don't realize how much of this is actually pre-birth in the womb at the time of birth, I've seen it play out in a dozen different ways with clients that I work with in therapy and doing the ketamine assisted psychotherapy with. And then we can acknowledge it, we can heal that wound. Now the hole is not there anymore. Now we don't have to continue with the same patterns that are dysfunctional anymore.
And that's just so amazing how you can trace it back. And I think that's where therapy is so helpful, because it is so important to understand like where it began, like
Mhm.
otherwise you're going off of what's happening in the present, and maybe worried about the future and maybe replaying certain things from the past that you can remember. But with, the psychedelic assisted therapy, like it allows you to go deeper, and
Yes,
that's what it feels like. So because I was going to ask you, like, for those who just are new to the idea, like, how can non-ordinary, states of consciousness unlock the healing in ways that traditional methods can't? And I think that's really what it is. Like, I answered my own question,
it is.
just
It
listening to
is.
you.
Yes. And part of what it gives us the opportunity to do, it is as if we're able to see what our life is about from a different level, a different perspective. Oftentimes in dreams can do this too. And remember, the scriptures are filled with dreams. Somebody has a dream. There's a revelation in a dream. Dreams are very important. And there's a verse in the scriptures that said, God speaks to his beloved in dreams. And so whether it's from dreams or from non-ordinary states created by the psychedelic medicines, it gives us that view that we can look and see our lives from a new perspective. And we actually get to see the whole picture. It's not just fragments or in it, it's a bird's eye view from a level of awareness that I can see the whole thing play out before me and go, oh, I get it. I see why this happened this way. And I have greater empathy for myself and oftentimes greater empathy for the people that were in those scenes as well, because everybody probably was expressing their own level of trauma that was unhealed and just perpetuated generation after generation. And so that's the beauty of the medicine. That's the beauty of the psychedelic medicine, of the ketamine assisted psychotherapy, of dream work, of ritual work. All of those work to help us to heal and understand those patterns.
Love that you called out in the dreams. And I think that's so important because I get downloads in dreams as well, but also too, like when I meditate. And I meditate in a different way. I'm actually going to write about it because I'm like, I don't just meditate in a traditional way. I actually like visualize myself in a different realm, like so I can get downloads that way. And so I
Hmm.
love that you kind of mentioned that because I think that's important to call out. But when we haven't done that work or we're not doing the work, it's difficult to receive the information, and so it's so important to do that work. And what I like to call the inner mirror work, like
Hmm.
where you're cleaning off your inner mirror. Otherwise, it's, mucky. Like, have you ever looked in a mirror that's not clean? Like
Hmm.
you're not going to get a true representation of what you're looking at. And so that's the same thing, with doing your inner work. But I love the dreams. Like I'm gonna steal that. I'm gonna put that in my course too, because that's so good. Because I get
Definitely.
downloads that way, and I'm like, I just completely forgot to add that. That's so good.
Yes. And in Psychedelics, Dreams and Rituals, the book that's out now, it has how do I do this? How do I open and prepare myself to receive the dreams and get the downloads? And it has it tells you how to set intention. There's a little tiny meditation that you can read to invite your dreams to come because dreams are kind of like friends, if we don't invite them over, they're not going to come, and so or we'll just wake up and go, oh, that was weird, and not really benefit from all that the dreams are revealing to us, which
Yeah.
is a lot, and the dreams, similar to the scriptures, are in metaphor too. There's symbols, there's images, there's pictures. It's a language that we have to begin to learn to understand. That's why when Jesus taught, I and here's great because it weaves everything together that we've been talking about. One of my favorite stories is when Nicodemus comes to Jesus. And Nicodemus comes in the dark of night because he's a really, mighty official and he's got this big position and he can't really be seen with Jesus. I mean, come on, this is the guy he's chasing, and now he needs to go to him for to ask him a question, And so Jesus, of course, meets Nicodemus, and Nicodemus, asks him, how do I go? How do I get this healing that I need? And Jesus said, you have to, you know, be born again. You have to be reborn. And Nicodemus is thinking literally, right? And he's like, I don't get it. I'm going to get back in my mother's womb. I mean, it's like, this doesn't make any sense, dude. I don't get it. And, but Jesus is saying to us, oh, clearly, we have to be spiritually reborn. And it's not just one time. We're going to be born again and again and again. And there's many incarnations and many rebirths that we will have in this one lifetime. And so it's such a great, kind of story of healing for all of us, using symbol, we have to be born again. We have to be reborn. And that birth is in spirit, in truth, in life, in relationship, in our work, in what we're called to do. And we get that when we become willing. And this is the part that's really a key, and it's the whole key to the recovery program, is there has to be that little tiny bit of willingness, and what we have to be willing to surrender. And it's probably why the story is about Nicodemus, because Nicodemus is a really high official, so he's got a big ego, right? He's like, I'm Nicodemus, and Jesus is saying you have to surrender your ego, because if not, then that's what people identify with. And that causes us to have sickness and separation in our soul.
Absolutely. That's why God gives us free will, and we have to be willing to do the work.
That's it.
We have
That's
to
it.
be willing to call him in. And so, like, it's so beautiful. Like you had said, like, when you are doing the work, those signs, those synchronicities, those dreams, like you're able to kind of make that connection. And so tying it back to what you said before, you have to be willing to read, but you also have to be willing to write. And I think that's so important because we are moving so fast in our lives, and we tend to miss a lot of things. And so when you have those dreams or downloads or whatever you want to call them, write them down, put them somewhere that you can then revisit later so you can start connecting those dots. I mean, that's what truly helped me. I'm a journal. I've been journaling since I could write at 5,
Me too. Me
been,
too.
but I didn't know it was called journaling. I called it my diary,
Right.
because I was reading Judy Blume back in the day.
Yes.
She had that beautiful book, Dear God, It's Me, Margaret. And so she was
Yes.
reading it all the time, like, Dear God, and I adapted that. I stole it, I used
Hmm.
it myself. And I love that I've always written, because it also helps me not just process, but release. So
Hmm.
then I'm not carrying it, because a lot of what we carry in our minds, we also carry in our body. And I think
Hmm.
you get that, like, because the body does keep the score. So
Oh yeah.
after all that tension comes, we're carrying all of that energy, and then it affects the soul.
Yes. And going back to the illustration that I used with the woman who had the anorexia and the bulimia, her body had kept the score of that starvation in the womb. And so we had to identify how the body was holding on to that and then do the releasing work. And once that happened, although she struggles periodically, it's nothing like she used to struggle before. And she had been to some of the best treatment centers, that
Oh,
were available, and they couldn't get to the core. And that's part of this. We have to get to the root, and the only way you get to any root in the garden is by doing some
in a
digging.
gardener, you got to dig. Exactly. Oh my
Yes.
goodness. I just love that. Well,
Yes.
you're taking care of so many people and have been for so many years. Like,
Yes.
you fuel yourself back up and energize yourself to continue to do the work, mind, body, and soul.
Well, balance is really important, and that's a critical part for anyone, and especially as women because we tend to do too much. I have a lovely inspirational read that I do to every day, and it's called Women Who Do Too Much. Because I
Oh
have to
my gosh.
I know it's written
That's
by Ann
amazing.
Wilson Schaaf. God bless her. She's not with us anymore, but I still read it every
Oh,
day because it helps me to remember, you know, someone outside of me isn't going to say, don't put any more on your plate. I'm the only one who can manage that. And so, I work on inner balance. I work on my own spiritual life. Every day is started with some kind of inspirational reading. It just has to be that way. And my dream work. So the very first thing I'm doing, and I'm also doing it through the night because sometimes dreams will wake you up and you can just write them down, because that's when I'm quiet. Let's face
absolutely.
it.
Well, and your world is quiet, right?
And my
Like, I
world is
tell
good.
people I got the idea for Sunday Soul Day at 2 a.m.
Exactly.
And I woke up and I wrote it down.
That's it.
And so,
That's it.
because otherwise, I mean, I just grabbed my phone, I didn't grab a pen because otherwise I've been looking all over the place. But I, just put it in my notes because I was like, I might forget this when I wake up,
Yes.
and
Yes.
it was Sunday Soul Day, and
Yeah.
that's what I heard. And I was
Wow.
like, beautiful. And it was so amazing because I had just maybe earlier that day seen a quote from a gentleman, um, Ruben Harris, who's a CEO of several different companies and founder, but he had said success on Monday starts on Sunday.
Hmm.
So I had just kind of seen that Sunday, in my mind. And then I think about how I spend my Sundays. I spend
Mm-hmm.
Sundays fueling myself back up for the week ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so, and then the Soul Day, I'm always revisiting this book that is called A Beautiful Morning. I don't know if you're familiar with this book, but I feel like you would appreciate it. It's by Ashley Ellington Brown. And I'm always revisiting it, getting new ideas for how to spend my morning.
Mm-hmm.
In there, she talks about fueling the soul. And so it all came together with the tagline for the show, Weekly Fuel for Your Mind, Body, and Soul, based on
Beautiful.
those things. So shout out to both of them. And I had the gift of, in a full circle moment, of being able to actually interview Ashley Ellington Brown, on the show. So I was very grateful for that.
Oh my goodness. And that's such a great illustration of how, when we prepare the garden of our mind, when we prepare the garden of our soul, what we are supposed to do, our life meaning, our purpose, our, divine calling to a certain degree will and is always revealed to us. And we have to be receptive and we have to have some quiet spaces. And even if it's during our nighttime, if we get that little dream or nudge, write it down, record it. You can record it on your voice memo on your phone too. You can even hear your own voice saying it, to you, which can be reflective as well. And then work with those dreams. Keep inviting them to come. Keep immersing yourself and allow the beloved to speak to you in your dreams. In fact, it's so interesting that you said that the new book that I'm working on right now is called Divine Trilogy, Finding the Beloved. And we'll definitely have to do something,
Yes,
maybe
I'll
a,
have
a
you back
show.
on. No, that would be
Yes,
wonderful. Oh my
yes.
gosh, I can't wait for that one.
Yes, and it's a teaching memoir. It's my story because I've been on this path for a very long time. And one of the little twists in this path that's been very interesting is I've been married more than one time, and that carries its own stigma in our culture.
Yeah.
And the universe and God was always kind of speaking to me in ways and always is. And my first husband's name is Dave, and David means the beloved. And then my second husband's name, that one ended in divorce, sadly, and that was a whole pain journey in and of itself. My second husband, I surrendered. I said, my picker's broken. You pick for me, God. And guess what? That person's name was David.
No, come on.
Yes. And we had this wonderful marriage and ministry work that we did together for many, many years. And then unexpectedly, he passed away, just like massive heart attack kind of passed away. So, sometimes we have to go through these trials and sometimes we have to go through these tribulations, and then this is why it's called Divine Trilogy. Another David comes into my life. And so it's David means the beloved. And so it was the beloved's way of saying, I'm here for you. I'm showing up for you over and over and over again. And so it's this wonderful journey of finding the beloved and knowing that we are loved deeply and always, and it just
Just as
allowing,
we are. Just as
yes,
we are.
just
Exactly.
as we are.
Yeah.
Yes, so that will be coming soon.
Oh, I can't
Coming
wait. Oh my
attractions.
gosh. Thank you for sharing that with the audience. That
Yes,
is so beautiful. That's
yes.
so beautiful. Wow. Three Davids.
Three Davids, yes, but one unforgettable journey to the
Yeah,
beloved. And
seriously.
that's really the key. The beloved is here speaking to us in our dreams, helping us to understand through the scriptures, through the stories, through Jesus, through 12
Through
steps,
people,
through
through relationships, through everything.
through people, through
Yeah,
relationships,
yeah,
through marriages.
yeah.
You know, the place where you're struggling probably is the place where the beloved shows up too, because life is messy in that way. And we have to be able to deal with and willing to experience and be in the mess of our lives and know that we're not alone in that messiness.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Thank you. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Gave me chills. Like we're in a moment right now where mental health innovation is accelerating. What gives you the most hope right now in this renaissance of healing? And what practical tools I would say that you can maybe share with the listener today to start their own journey, besides, willing to read and write?
I think it's a willingness to surrender. All right. And that is not an easy thing for us to do. And so that surrender means, I can't figure this out all by myself. It's just not going to happen that way. I have to surrender into spirit. I have to surrender into a community that will love and support me. I have to surrender into my own pain. And at times, it's that surrender and that allowing surrender my ego. you know, with all the status artifacts that we're supposed to have, we have to surrender. And in that surrendering, we find the essence of who we truly are. And we find God, and we find spirit, and we find the beloved, and we find ourselves, which is absolutely most important. And that intersection where we are not alone. We've never been alone, and we will never be alone. We've just lost touch with that.
That is just a gem. If you guys caught that, it's so good. It's interesting that you say that because I do believe like we're here for four reasons. And it's to love and to be loved, to discover our gifts. And in doing that, that's finding out who we are,
Mhm.
and then sharing those gifts.
Yes. And I would add to that, and I think this is really important. I work with people that are 19 all the way to their early 80s. And there is no time when it isn't of value to do this work. Because when we get to the end of life, sometimes there's that existential distress and even a fear of death. And we have to understand that that fear, that angst, that anxiety is coming up because we haven't perhaps done some of the healing work that we're meant to do. And it's never too late to do that healing work. And whenever we get there is when we get there. And so, I've worked with plenty of people in their 60s, 70s, and early 80s who were finally ready to be kind of relieved of this dis-ease or distress that they'd been carrying for their entire lives. And the good news is they don't have to take it on with them.
And also, they're breaking that generational curse, that
Yes.
generational trauma before they leave, the
Yes.
physical. So, wow,
And
wow.
some of the really interesting psychedelic research that had been started, decades ago, really was around this psilocybin, the mushrooms that were used in the studies at John Hopkins. And they were helping people who had this fear of death and this distress at the end of life. And this is well documented. Just look at the John Hopkins study on end of life. And they had just one experience with the psilocybin, with the mushrooms. And that one experience revealed to them this connectedness. And at best, that's what the psychedelic medicine does. It helps us to remember, reborn. It helps us to reconnect and know that we've never been separated. It was only in our own thoughts and our own feelings that we become separated. And when they have that experience of knowing that oneness again, and they have so many mystical experiences. They even have a survey that measures it, the mystical experience questionnaire, because so many had those kinds of mystical experiences. They tracked it and they could define it a little bit better. That feeling of awe, that feeling of wonder, that feeling of I am in touch with the essence of all life. And I've always been a part of that fabric. I just didn't see it for whatever reason. It's like the veils, get lifted from the eyes. And we then, and this is what the scripture says over and over, have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. And when we have the eyes to see and the ears to hear, which often can happen with that non-ordinary state of consciousness through psychedelics, through dreams, through ritual, we then don't have to carry that fear anymore. The fear is gone.
My gosh. Thank you so much for today. This was such a
Yes.
beautiful conversation. I am so grateful that we got to connect, that the universe and God worked in our favor, algorithm, all those things.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you again so much for
Thank you,
blessing
Demisha.
Sunday Soul Day. This was just incredible conversation.
My pleasure. And God bless you in the work that you're doing. May it just continue to go and multiply in the world in wonderful ways to share that healing love and energy that you radiate so beautifully.
Thank you so much. And everyone, as always, have an amazing Sunday. And do us a favor. I know for me, I learned a ton on this beautiful journey that I've been on with Gay and listening to her. Like, share your favorite part about this conversation or something new that you learned in the comments below.